this should be a fun one. So,
Oh, yeah.
truth be told, at the end of the last podcast that we recorded, we're kind of throwing around, once the cameras clicked off, throwing around like, got a list of topics that, we whittle our way through, but then popped into our heads, we're like, what if we just discussed what we struggle with, right? Like what is it that these days, even after so many years of CrossFit and so much knowledge of the methodology and countless workout sessions, it's still hard. It's still a grind. And I was like, I got a list. And you said that you had a list as well. And so here we are. So let's set the groundwork so people know, how long, even though you've said this in other episodes, how long have you been doing CrossFit, et cetera, et cetera? So when you say that something is still a struggle, they'll realize oh, wow, even after so long, Adrian struggles with fill in the blank.
The first CrossFit workout I ever did was in 2004. And I've been going pretty consistent since then. And, there's some peaks and valleys along the way. I'll tell you, from my perspective right now, it's hard to tell if I'm in a peak or a valley currently. So.
Fair enough. Okay. And I started in 2005, so you've got a year on me, and I've been profoundly consistent. I mean, I used to miss time in the gym pre-CrossFit, but like something about CrossFit, I really don't miss sessions. So I've been steaming pretty hard now for about whatever that comes out to, 16 years. Who did we say was going to go first, me or you?
I think you're going to go first, but let's preface this a little bit.
Okay.
And I think it's important because sometimes people come into conversations like this and, again, we talk poorly about the Instagram attention span, rightly so, in my opinion. But I do think that it's easy to fall into this mentality of, the inspiration soundbite. And no excuses and things of that, cliches that come up that really don't serve anybody, that I guess they can prove to be motivating in some circumstances, but really what they do is set up a false expectation, in my opinion. So I think it's important that you start framing things like this as the reality of committing to something long term. And it starts to open up the possibility that things are not going to be black and white. You're always going to have to be improving on some things, and you never put some things to bed. I know that years ago there was a series on CrossFit Journal called Killing the Fat Man. And, some people loved it, some people hated it. But what I thought was really profound about it and universal was that whole element that went into the title. It's like, hey, you can't kill this guy. He's always going to be coming back and knocking on your door. And, I'm not somebody that personally struggles with weight issues, but there's plenty of other things that run along a similar trajectory. You never put it to bed completely. It's always going to be something that you have to keep in mind. And that's the reality of life. So here we go.
Perfect lead in on several levels, because kind of in keeping with the killing the fat man, my first thing that I struggle with even to this day is nutrition, diet, food. And that is the top of my list. And we covered this in a previous Very Not Random podcast where I talked about the fact that I was an overweight kid and overweight for, my adolescence as well. Husky, I believe, was the nice term that they would use. And I hear some people, and I got my life together, right? I mean, I've leaned out, body composition's good, the whole 9 yards, looking at me, you probably wouldn't know that I was heavy, younger, et cetera, et cetera. But what some people, and I'm not one of them, I hear every now and then is maybe some people are eating bad. They cleaned up the diet. They got rid of the processed food, whatever it is. And maybe they did that for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And then for whatever reason, they had that treat that they always craved, that ice cream, that sandwich, whatever it was. And they're like, oh, my taste buds have just changed. I just didn't even taste good anymore. And I
love vegetables so much.
I am not that person. I don't care how disciplined I am. Talking about still being the same guy and that guy not going away. I don't care how disciplined I am, how many months go by. When I have that treat, that whatever, it releases a rush of endorphins and wonderful chemicals in my body that's equally powerful as the first time I ever had it. It's even more delicious because I haven't had it. And I could have it every day, every meal. It's a constant little demon that lives in me that I could eat junk every meal. I think it's fantastic. I think it's delicious. The advertising works for me. The chemicals that they put in it works for me. It's as addictive as a drug. And so me maintaining any sense of body composition or sanity or health is through not only the knowledge that I've learned as to what actual clean eating looks like through CrossFit, but then it's just straight up not sexy, old fashioned, just discipline of making a different choice of that's it. And I know that if I eat the bad thing, I'm going to feel bad because I've been eating clean. The attraction to eat it is still there, even though I know I'm going to feel so bad. And I cave in every now and then because I'm human for sure. And I pay for it. And I swear never again. And then it happens again. And then I swear never again, but those are far more infrequent than they used to be. They're not the norm. The norm is me eating clean most of the time. And every now and then I have, slip ups. But to say that like, oh, I was heavy when I was younger, struggled with food when I was younger. Yep, figured that out, killed the cravings, negative. To this very day, a massive struggle for myself, and just it probably always will be.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking to Stefan Roche on a previous episode, and he is, in my opinion, one of the most pragmatic people when it comes to nutrition. Like, he's such a wealth of information about all things training. But his ability to work with young athletes and just say, okay, here's what you need to do next step, and take away all the complexity around it is really admirable. And one of the strategies that he has his kids do is basically find a meal, tweak it so that it's reasonable portion, reasonable macronutrient breakdown, and then log that meal as like a go-to. And after a couple of weeks and a couple of months, you should have a couple options for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that are go-tos, that they don't have to be flashy. Right. They don't have to be the most delicious meal you've had, but they're good. There's something you're going to eat, and you know that they are in line with what you should be doing. So do you use a strategy like that to help keep you on track? Or like, how do you manage to, I know you've obviously got the discipline to do it, but what other tools, if any, are you using to kind of keep that at bay?
Largely it's the discipline, quite frankly. Okay. And I do allow myself, a cheat or treat at scheduled intervals, once or twice a week. And that works for me. I know some people can have a nibble here and a nibble there. That's not how I work. I've learned that the hard way. It's good for me to know that Wednesday night, I can go ahead and get a slab of carrot cake or, whatever it happens to be. What served me really well was I was fanatically, strictly adhering to the zone diet, many years ago, but I think I did it for at least a 5-year stretch. Like, I mean, like hardcore, if not as long as 7 now. And I don't weigh and measure to this day, but what that did is gave me a fantastic calibration of my eyeball and what appropriate portion is and is not, and the glycemic index of certain foods. And that has continued to serve me to make sure that when I am making choices, that I make good choices. And I will say, these days, I do break out the scale every now and then, but it's usually to make sure that I'm eating enough, and usually protein. Like, if I'm going to put protein on my plate, I want to make sure that I'm getting enough protein. The scale gets broken out then. And if I'm filling the rest of the plate with some avocado or some fruits and vegetables, I'm not really concerned about the portion of fruits and vegetables, because I'm not filling it with, Hawaiian sweet rolls, which, there's a lot easier, it's a lot easier to go off the rails.
They're so good.
They're so good. Tastes so good when it hits your lips.
Yeah, it's so easy to just, before you know it, there's like 4 down the hatch.
Yes, exactly. And so I've made some things that I've made some adjustments. I do find, some fruits and vegetables actually quite good. And I have developed an affinity to them just through repeated exposure. And I eat very little processed food actually in my daily life, other than when I allow myself those treats. So eating clean has kind of become a lifestyle, and I do enjoy how good it feels, and I don't enjoy the food hangover. And I'm also, and that helps the discipline. Like, I really, as corny as it sounds, I really like feeling good. And that's why I eat well. It's also why, I don't drink. And I don't drink for any crazy ethical or spiritual or whatever reasons. I don't like how my body feels after the fact, so I don't even go down the path, period. And it's the same way with me with food. So that kind of knowing how the end's going to feel usually helps me make good decisions. But I allow myself that pressure release every now and then.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like that scheduled pressure release is something that really works for you.
Works for me.
That's
works
cool.
for me.
Yeah.
I can't be left to my own devices, And and I only buy what I'm going to eat, right? So that's,
that's a big one. Yeah.
If I don't want it in the house.
Yeah, we could spiral off on a huge nutrition only, and maybe that is a great example of a future episode that we could expand on. But yeah, I think that strategy, if nothing else, is like don't buy it and keep it in your house if you don't want to be eating it. Go out and get it for a treat, or like
exactly. I drive to the grocery store.
Yep.
I drive to the grocery store.
But do not bring it back into the house. Yeah.
Yep. 100%. So that's my biggest.
Here's a hardcore one that I've heard along those same lines. Actually, my wife and I dabbled with this years ago, and it was like, okay, if you want a treat, you can have any treat you want, but you have to make it. So there's nothing, you can't have anything pre-made in the house, but like you want cookies, you got to bake them. Okay. Do you still really want them? And sometimes you do, and you're like, great, let's spend the morning doing that. Other times you're like, it's not worth it. Yeah, I'll do it some other time. I've got other things to do.
Well, and with the cookies, as soon as you make the cookie dough, they're just as good as the cookies. So just start eating the cookie dough, and you're solid. So that little demon continues to live in me.
Okay, well, I'll go next, and I'll kind of, this was actually second on my list, but I'll jump in because thematically it's consistent. I also have a hard time with eating, but in a different way.
I was going to say, I'm curious to hear where this is going.
Yeah, I've never had a problem. Like, I don't have a particular sweet tooth. When I was younger, I did, but I really don't enjoy a lot of sweet stuff these days, like as much as anybody else, I guess, but it's not something I find myself like, oh, I really want to go get XYZ. It's more like a opportunistic thing that if we're out for dinner with friends or something and somebody orders dessert, I'll have some of it. But it's not something that I reach for on my own. So not ever really a big problem there. But I don't prioritize my own eating. And it is very easy for me to get up in the morning. I'm good about breakfast. I'll usually get up in the morning, make a good breakfast, and then I'll get busy with my day, do whatever I have to do, especially now, like with work and other responsibilities I've got right now. I'm very busy, and it'll be common that after breakfast, I'll start grinding, and then it'll be 7 o'clock at night, and I'll look up and I'll say, oh, I guess I should probably eat something else.
Really?
Yeah. And so it's a perpetual struggle for me to make the time to eat on a regular basis and to eat enough to support my activity level. And I realize that that's probably rare. And it segues into another one that I've got. This is my fourth one on the list, but I'll leave that till later.
Is this the key to your leanness?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's just like a decades-long caloric deficit.
You and I need to meet in the middle, because I'm not one to miss a meal.
Yeah. So that's a tricky one for me, is frequency and volume of food consumption, and making sure
you
to
threw
set
it
myself
my way,
up for
so
that.
I can throw it your way. Do you have a way to correct that?
Yeah, recently I've been getting back to it. I'm not flawless yet, and not where I want to be yet with it. But taking the time the night before to lay out what my next day is going to look like, and consciously insert time where I'm like, I'm going to eat at this time, and putting it on the books is a game changer for me. The days that I do that, I'm like, yep, I end up at the end of the day and I'm like, okay, I feel like I've supported myself nutritionally. The days that I don't do that, I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed. I don't want to, I just want to turn my brain off and end this day and move on.
Right.
I'll wake up the next day, go, and then it's off the rails. So that's a big one for me.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we're on opposite spectrum there. Were you about to take it on a tangent? Do you want me to go back now?
No, I think that's pretty wrapped up, and that's something it's a consistent theme through my life. I'll exist on fumes until it's just not tenable anymore, Well,
it's 2 hours, it's 12:30 in the afternoon here for me. It's later for you. So now, have you had lunch or have you missed lunch today?
I did. I ate lunch today.
Okay,
and that's
right,
actually,
so it's a win.
That's part of the reason I was late, as I was scrambling and I was like, I got to eat. And I had to make the decision. I was like, do I text Pat and suck it up and say, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late, or do I not eat lunch? And I was like, I need to eat. So
look at you. Okay, good for you. Good for you. All right. And not to get us off on a tangent, because they said you don't have a sweet tooth or cravings, but if memory serves, don't you have a niche thing that you crave, like some unusual licorice or some sort of, what is it?
Yeah, but that's just good for you. It's I love like Scandinavian salty brutal licorice. I love it.
Brutal.
Like I grew up. Oh yeah, it's the worst. Like most people they're not interested at all. But I love it. I can't get enough of that stuff. But it is harsh enough that you have like one piece and you're like, I'm good.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not really conducive to like massive consumption.
Okay. Well, that's a blessing right there. Okay. Heading back to me, the next thing that I struggle with to this day, no stranger to you or anyone that knows me, going overhead. Anything overhead. It's just a running joke with me, and it is what my overhead position is terrible. Somebody would think I was messing with them. Like if I backed myself up against a wall so that my shoulder blades and my butt were touching the wall, and then I locked out my elbows and raised my arms in front, and you just saw where they stopped. They would stop so far out in front, nowhere near the wall, that you'd be like, come on, you're joking. That's ridiculous. And it's the truth. And that's how I was when I started 16 years ago. And it's kind of the same right now. And that's not for lack of effort. I mean, just over the course of all the wonderful and well-intentioned human beings that I have interacted with around the world through CrossFit, for people who specialize in, flexibility, mobility, and everyone try this band ball, this motorized gun, try this whatever, try this routine. It's I don't know if it's just structural, right? Maybe it's not.
Well,
muscle,
let me say two things about that. Having been friends with you for a long time now. Number one, I attest to the work that you have put in on that. Like it's definitely something that like you're not
right.
You're not taking the easy way out on that. And second, let me put my optimist hat on for a second and say, okay, if you're somebody that struggles with overhead position or lack of flexibility naturally, and you've effectively maintained that same range of motion over a 16-year period?
16 years, yeah.
Yeah, I'd call that a win. I think left to your own devices doing nothing,
yes,
that's only going one direction. So the fact that you've maintained it in the face of it being not great to begin with, I think is still a win, in my opinion.
Yep. So I appreciate that. But for those at home, that I've been trying to get loose for 16 years, right? Okay, so some things are a long-term project that might never quite be finished, right? Like the addition to your house that still isn't quite finished. And the other part of that, which is, it's not all hope is lost. Even with that limitations, shall we call it that, like no one goes, oh, Pat Sherwood, huge clean and jerk, right? Just massive split jerk. Nobody associates me with massive weight overhead, right? Even with that deficiency, tremendous fitness is possible through scaling, modifications. And when I do go overhead, I just go lighter, and that's okay. Or I use dumbbells a lot when I go overhead, because they're a little more, while they're more demanding, they're also more forgiving. That if my left shoulder's tighter than my right shoulder, my left arm has to be a little bit more out in front. I know that's not ideal, but that's me. And the dumbbells let me do that. And so you can still get a lot accomplished, even if you have something that appears to be chronic. And as much as you'd like for it to go away, it isn't. Learn to work around it, learn what you can do, and like you said, also continue to try to remedy it. Don't give up, because even if you don't remedy it, I think you make a good point that even maintaining is a win, and not losing range of motion. So yeah, anything overhead, that's my number 2 right there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take it in a different direction. This one is, I think, something that you also share. I suspect it's going to be on your list, but for a different reason. My second one is actually my first, but jump to second for the nutrition tie-in, is sleep. But not in the common sense where I have trouble sleeping or I'm not a good sleeper. Once I'm down, I have no problem. I can sleep through the night, no problem, deep sleep, easy peasy. My problem is putting myself to bed. I can always find something else to do. I can always find something else I'm interested in. I can always find a way to convince myself that like, just a little bit later. And, I'm not a big TV watcher. So it's not things like that, but there's always something that I can find to focus my attention on. And then before I know it, it's way late. And then the next day is coming no matter what. So I've just cut off the back end. Ooh. So the struggle for me is constantly trying to establish the shutdown time and stick to it.
That's a great one. I didn't put it on my list. And now that you say that, I realized that I should have, but leaving it in your court with an honorary mention that yes, absolutely. Are you not getting to bed just because of the things keeping you up that you're, as you mentioned, you're profoundly busy with what you're doing? Are you a workaholic, and is it work things, or is it other just miscellaneous hobbies and interests that occupy your mind and keep you up too late?
It can be both. It kind of depends seasonally on what's going on, with work or outside of that. So sometimes it is work. That one I find actually easier to mitigate because I can recognize them like, oh, this is work. I need to stop. I need to step away. That one is actually more identifiable. The insidious ones are like my personal interest, hobbies, whatever, that, just a little bit more time on that. Or, I'll check out one more article on this thing that I, have taken an interest in. And then before you know it, it's trouble.
And you're talking about it, so you're aware of it. And this has been a theme that we've touched on up to this point. Do you have some sort of a solution that you try to manage it, or you don't even realize that you look at the clock and you're like, oh no, it happened again. Time to go to bed.
No, same thing. Same strategy that helps me with my meal frequency is the same strategy that helps me get to bed on time, is setting a schedule and not being a tyrant with it. I don't have to beat myself over the head with it, but a loose guideline of, okay, here's what I have coming up the next day. Here's when I have to be up in the morning. Let's count backwards. That's the target time I should be moving towards bedtime. And when I take the couple minutes to do that, it at least sets me up on the path. I'm not likely to land like right on target, but I'll be close,
Well, when it goes well, how many hours do you spend in bed? And when it goes poorly, how many hours do you spend in bed?
That I think is the most illuminating question you could ask, because I do have enough flexibility in my schedule that when I'm on it, I can get an 8-hour night of sleep, no problem. That is perfectly within my ability to do. When I am not disciplined about it, it's as little as like 5 hours, maybe less.
You can only play that game for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what's good actually to pair with not sleeping is missing meals and not eating. I think that's a good combo for the body.
Totally, yeah. Especially if you want to work out regularly and, be active.
Yeah, exactly.
Great combination.
All right. So yes to the sleep. I'm with you there as well. My next one, which I struggle with to this day, I don't think it may not be a common one, but man, it is, I'm being brutally honest with myself, explosive power. I just don't have it. At least I don't think I have it in regards to how long I've been training, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, I didn't find CrossFit until I was 30. And previous to that, based upon the fact that, my life's dream was to be a SEAL and do all this stuff. Well, you're an endurance athlete. So I spent the overwhelming majority of my life going long, hours of running and swimming, and nothing explosive in any way, shape, or form, and no real meaningful strength training. And to this day, I've obviously improved, with, cleans and snatches and all that stuff for sure. My hip opening and, posterior chain and all that stuff is not even in the same universe as it used to be. But however, I still feel like it's one of those areas that based upon what my previous life was, it has improved, but it's not going to blow anybody out of the water for the fact that, I'm 16 years in. I continue to do it. It's great, but it's not on my list of strengths. But I don't mind the slower lifts, quite frankly. I think my slower lifts are wonderful, like my deadlift, front squat, things like that. Great. But, we're not talking explosive hip opening there, and power clean. No, not my friend. So,
And have you noticed, like, like, have you gone through cycles throughout your training where you do try to increase the volume of those particular lifts to see if it does accelerate the progress there or improve it? Like, have you noticed anything that does kind of push the needle forward? Or is it one of those things where you're like, no, as much time as I want to put into it, it's a diminishing return and it really only sets at one point?
That I think is more of the latter right there.
Okay.
So for example, a 225 power clean is about that's about my upper limit right there. Like that's what I've got for you. And I would much rather squat clean it any day of the week. I would much rather squat. If you said, hey, there's 225 on the bar, do you want to do 10 power cleans or 10 squat cleans? It's the easiest decision in the world for me. I would so much rather do 10 squat cleans. It's not even, I don't have to pull the bars high. I don't care about the leg strength. I don't care about the leg strength required to stand the bar up. My leg strength, I actually feel is quite good. I just don't have to elevate the bars high. I'll take those squat cleans any day of the week. The elevating the bar, it's just, again, it's far better than it used to be, but it's not. I would list it as one of the things that just I continue to struggle with, continue to work on, but that's okay. I can still be wonderfully fit, even having that be an area of, needing improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's so specific. It's that to me really speaks to one of those elements that without a lot of training, that would be a hard thing to self-identify, I think. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting. I think those are the types of things that reveal themselves over time once you've put some years in.
And it could be unique to the individual as well, because I also feel like I personally am one of those athletes where the top end on something like the power clean, for example, the top end might not be that impressive, but I can move 90% over and over and over and over and over and over again. Just fantastic. Yeah. But then there's not much more till you hit the ceiling. That's just kind of how I've always been, for better or for worse.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. Yeah,
you're learning a bit about me, Boz.
All right, I'll move on. Mine is also kind of movement-based here and workout specific. And this is one that is a little bit, I think it could come across as a humble brag. And I certainly don't intend it that way, because it is a legitimate thing that can hold me back. And I think it's not obvious if I were to just say it without context. So here we go. So, one of the things I struggle with is relying on the fact that I have good movement and good technique and hiding behind that instead of truly putting the foot on the gas pedal from time to time and truly trying to kind of push the limits of my workout. It's, I move well. I have pretty good understanding of a lot of the movements we're going to be doing in CrossFit and beyond that. I have a pretty decent movement vocabulary. Mm-hmm. I grew up doing a lot of kind of individual sports with a focus on that sort of thing, gymnastics and acrobatics and rock climbing and stuff like that. So it's easy for me to get into a situation where I'm working out and I default to, well, I'm just going to set up and be flawless and these are going to look good. And that justifies me not pushing to a point that I know I should be, especially on some workouts. Yep. And I can use it as a mental escape from the intensity that I know I should be pursuing.
We're talking about just classic threshold training.
Correct. Yep.
The speed wobbles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So you don't get to the wobbles too frequently.
No. And when I do, I convince myself that maybe I don't need to be doing that, or, this is outside the bounds of what I'm comfortable with. But that's not the case. I have plenty of skill reserve, like we were talking about in a previous episode. I've got enough skill reserve that I should have more confidence pushing that. And so it leads me to believe that it's just kind of that, once shy, what is it? Once bitten,
I can't remember. Shy.
Yeah, there you go.
And for the listeners or viewers at home, potentially new to CrossFit, I don't want them to misinterpret your message and correct me if I'm wrong, but what Adrian's saying here, if you're listening at home, he's not talking about getting to the point where the movement is reckless, where the movement is dangerous, where the movement is whatever. It's just, you're pushing the pace a little bit that now you've you're starting to pull early in that power clean with your arms instead of, having this, the flawless, not bending your arms until just the right moment because you're trying to push the pace a little bit. These inefficiencies pop up, if you will. And those inefficiencies are usually indicative of you you're kind of bumping into the boundaries of your performance, and you're doing it right and doing it fast, and you're trying to maneuver both right at the limits of your capacity. And that's a wonderful place to be. There's a lot of development that occurs there, and there's a lot of self-knowledge that occurs there as well. But you're, hesitant or reluctant or don't go there too frequently. Do you ever have an intentional session where you're like, this is going to be the session this week that I'm gonna let the wheels shake a bit, or no?
I have in the past, and I haven't recently, and I need to get back to it. That's one of the things that I've identified about my training recently, that I've been resting on my laurels a little bit. So that's definitely something that upcoming, I need to focus on a little bit more. And actually, you've really helped me with this inadvertently. I don't think you've realized this, but we go back and forth texting once in a while. You'll shoot me a workout and you're like, hey, try this out. And usually when you do that, that's when I set that aside and I'm like, I'm going to really try to hammer this one instead of just, doing the training that I would do normally. So that has helped a lot. And so, like I said, in the past, I've done that. I haven't been as good about that lately, and it is something I need to get back to.
Quick tangent since you brought up the text message, because there was one that I texted you a while ago that I thought it was a sleeper. It didn't look that bad on paper. And then you wrote me back and you obviously had the same experience. What was that? And I can't remember it specifically, but what's funny is it was several months ago and I just programmed it again. It's going to make a repeat. And it was 2 short couplets with 5 minutes rest between. It had the air bike, and the first one was a light power snatch, and the second one a light power clean based upon percentages, but they were low, 50 or 60%. The reps were low. It was 9 calories on the bike, 9 power snatches, and
that was so bad. Yeah. Get ready. Bad. If you guys are following Linchpin, get ready.
So bad. It's going to make another appearance.
Yeah. Well, before we put this one to bed, talking about this out loud instead of just writing my thoughts down, it's, I think there's something a little bit deeper in there, and it's not so much that I'm concerned about, the wheels falling off of my technique or whatever. It's that I have this self-belief that there's this very narrow strip between my technique being good and then just falling off a cliff. But the reality is that I have a huge reserve of good technique because I do move well and I do have a good understanding of the movements. But somehow I use that as an excuse to be like, well, if I just push too far, I'm going to fall off this technical cliff. And that's not the case at all. I have a bigger reserve than that, but I use it to cop out on intensity.
Interesting. So, yeah. Well, it's that intensity is a bear, man. It's a bear. A bear will jump up and bite you every now and then.
That's right.
All right, that's 3 down. Here's my 4th one, and I have 5 unless one pops into my head. So here's my 4th one, second to last.
Okay.
I struggle with, to this day, feeling like I need to meet other people's expectations with my workouts. I wish that I could say that I was, and I talk about this a lot, and probably because I struggle with it a lot is why I'm familiar with it, battling your ego, realizing why you're working out this for yourself. And you're not doing it for anybody else. And who cares what anybody else thinks? Make the smartest decision for you, right? The heck with all that other extemporaneous external social pressure. But the truth is also, you're just having a real conversation. We're fairly well known in the CrossFit ecosystem. And so people pay attention to what you do. And hey, you've been doing this for 16 years and you've been around for whatever. I expect that you should have these times or these lifts or these whatevers. And I may have a bad workout every now and then. And I hate to admit this, going to do, fill in the blank, whatever workout. And then at the end, maybe I fell short of maybe not even my own expectations, but what I feel like others would expect me to get on that workout. And then I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to post this one on Instagram. How ridiculous and adolescent is it even for me to say that? But the truth is I hate to admit it, but it goes through my head of are are people going to be let down that I didn't, it took me 12 minutes to do this workout when I think it should have taken me 10, and of course nobody knows how I slept last night and, all the other 5,000 factors that have to go into what that time was. But I feel the pressure to meet somebody else's expectations every now and then. And I consciously try to put it to the side, and I'm usually successful, but that little demon wins every now and then. And it chaps my behind. So,
dude,
yeah.
In the parlance of our time, Pat, I feel you on that one. That's a big one for me also, and I hadn't written that one down. But oh man, I mean, even just this week, like last week, I had a really rough workout. I've been going to an affiliate, which is fun. It's new for me to be on the kind of athlete client end of the affiliate. First time in my life, actually, that I've been a member, not, either actively coaching or part owner or whatever. And yeah, I've had a couple of rough workouts like that. And that's exactly my train of thought is like, oh, I'm a kind of a minor fixture in the community. People, they definitely have this expectation of me. I've been doing it this long. And that's actually the big one for me is I've been training this long, like this big chunk. I should be here instead of where I am. How is it possible that I'm only here with all this training behind me? And then I spiral on that, and it's tough to get out of it. So
or they see you at the games, you're the head judge at the games, and maybe somehow they feel like that games magic should have rubbed off on you. You should be a games level athlete,
totally,
or I program workouts. I'm known for programming workouts, so that must mean I'm great at all the workouts that I program. That is not what that means in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's just I get plenty of bad days and plenty of things that I still struggle with, but man, sometimes it's hard to just do that. And I almost went down another rabbit hole, but maybe we'll save that for another time.
Close call. Close call. You pulled it out of the ditch.
Okay. But that was mine. Okay, so now back to you.
All right, so this is my fourth one, and this was the final one I had written on the list. But man, you had some good ones. The fourth one that I had, and this kind of ties together some of the other bits and pieces, is that I often put myself last as far as priority. So when I look at the things that I have going on throughout the day, when I look at responsibilities I've got to external entities, I am way more willing to prioritize those and work hard at those rather than do the things that I know I need to do to make sure that I'm good to go. Which doesn't make any sense when you think about it, because how could you sustain your responsibilities to these externalities if you can't sustain yourself? What is a cheesy saying that you can't pour from an empty cup, And there's all sorts of kind of trite ways that people have described that phenomena over the year, but I'm very much somebody who wants to get along, wants to do right by other people, and sometimes that instinct can really come around to get me because I don't put myself first. So I think that ties together my not eating frequently enough, not getting to bed on time, stuff like that, because I'm like, I'll do this other stuff.
We could have another conversation on this, and not to be, United States centric, because I'm sure it happens in other countries, but this is a massive problem, in my opinion anyway, in the United States, is just the workaholic culture of the never shutting it off culture. The tasks never end. You have 17 different platforms, from Slack to Asana to whatever it is, that constantly let you know what you are doing or is not doing. And it's just, you get notifications on your phone 24 hours. I mean, it is very easy to just stay in that grind and not have the quality of life, the personal time, the downtime, the just stress relief time, because there's always going to be 28 more emails sitting in that inbox.
Exactly.
Always. Man, you would save somebody's life with this answer. Have you found some sort of a way to actually manage that?
Honestly, no. This is probably the biggest struggle that I have across like the breadth of my life. So I don't have a really good, succinct way to say that this is how I've managed it, other than I guess it's one of those things that I'm starting to look at with a more examined eye on a more regular basis and own up to the fact that that is the case and that is the default kind of action. And so through that awareness, it's starting to kind of shift things a little bit. And again, not to come back to the same thing I've said before, but I had the good fortune of taking this productivity workshop that was put on by these neuroscientists from Berkeley back when I was living in California. And it was really interesting. They presented a bunch of different research that they've done on what people do to become, in their words, to maintain peak productivity. And baked into their definition of peak productivity was sustainability. They're not interested in productivity for a short period of time that then cause burnout and a decrease in performance. They looked at what do people do to sustain productivity over the long term. And the big takeaways for me on that was you really are only going to be able to execute on like 2 to 3 key tasks a day. That's about it. And so if you are trying to balance between 5, 6, 7, 8 different things, number one, it's a recipe for just mediocrity on all of it. And number two, like it's impossible. You just won't get the result you're looking for. So starting to shift on a larger time frame, like you look at a week or a month, identify those big picture things that you need to be doing to kind of move the needle forward in your life and place those on that timeline. And then the rest of the stuff can kind of you can kind of let it go.
Interesting. Yeah. And it'd be good if some people's, just in multiple companies all around the world, bosses realize that about 2 to 3 big things is all you could expect each day, because I think it's easy to throw 4, 5, 6, 7, or there's always a new task that's thrown out. And if you ever asked your boss, like, oh, okay, you gave me this new task. It's of course top priority, as is every other task you've ever given me in your entire life. So my question is, what would you like me to deprioritize so I can make this a priority? And they're like, well, no, we're not deprioritizing anything. This is just another top priority.
What do you mean?
Just stuff it into your bucket and somehow make it work. Oh,
that's helped a lot. Like some of the tools there's a couple other things that they expanded on that were really good. But yeah, I think for me, it's just the awareness of like, I have this tendency to do everything else except take care of myself. And that goes just with like workouts too. Like there'll be definitely stretches where I like to work out. It's something that's important to me. It has been my whole life. And I don't have time today. I'll push this off. And then a couple days go by and I realize I haven't been in the gym. And I'm like, why? I had the time. I have the inclination. What's the disconnect here?
Yes.
So yeah, for me, it's really about just taking a good look at myself and being honest with when I am serving outside versus inside priorities.
That's a huge yes to that. I tell myself as often as I can that at a certain time at the day, at the end of the day, like I just got to shut it down. Because you could stay on the laptop another 3 hours if you wanted to.
Sure.
You just got to shut it down. It's a tsunami of work. It'll be there in the morning, and at some point in time, just it is what it is. Okay. Final one for me.
Last but not least. Yeah, what do you got?
I struggle with to this day guilt if I need to miss a workout or if I miss a workout. And guilt is a light word. It doesn't actually really get across what happens to me both internally and externally. I'm going to sound like a raging psychopath when I say this. If I don't get in my workout, I don't want to say that it'll ruin my day because that's very dramatic, but I feel like there is unfinished business or some itch that I can't scratch, or like there's like a splinter in me, like there's something that is unresolved and it chews and eats at me in a very negative way, quite frankly, so much so that it could even like sour my mood externally. Like I'm not as pleasant. I'm very pleasant to be around, as you know.
Of course. Yeah.
But it sours me, and people have to deal with me, friends and family, and that's not good. And I think I'm just an idiot every now and then. And I think it also relates back to the fact of like being heavy most of my life and all that, and not wanting to be that guy again. And that since that person lives in me, like I just don't ever want that slippery slope to start. And so I gotta do it. I gotta do it. I gotta do it. And missing a session is indicative of not having the discipline or time management or whatever with my day to actually fit in something which should be important. And it just spirals really badly. And this could be something where it would be really obvious that it's okay to miss the day, whether you're on a family vacation or, you know, you're going to drive your wife to the hospital because she's going to have a child. Just throwing things out there, okay? Like hypothetically, things that should be so obvious that you're like, oh, you shouldn't have a moment's worth of guilt about that.
Oh wow!
I just not. It's not how I'm wired. It's and getting in that workout is not just for me anyway. You know, I've expressed to you and everyone else before that I don't necessarily enjoy working out. Like I don't enjoy the discomfort and the struggle, but I do enjoy what it gives me. And I think the working out, as much as it's good for my physical fitness, I need it each day. Because like we're saying, you could work all day, just pressure. But for me, once the workout's over, it's that much needed pressure release for the mind, the soul. And I don't get that in too many other areas, because other than that, we're just grinding all day long with work responsibilities, family responsibilities. There's very few things in a very busy life that are just 100% me and my time that yields some sort of a benefit. And the workout's probably that one. And so when that gets missed, I think all that other pressure from the day doesn't have a good, healthy release. And so if I have to miss a workout, it eats at me in a way that isn't healthy, quite frankly. And, you know, I'm talking about it, so obviously I'm aware of it, but it's a struggle. It's a legitimate struggle. And I don't miss many workouts because of that. Like even on a rugged day that we have to get up early, I'll get up extra early to get it in, just to get it in. And it doesn't even matter if it went well. I just know that I got it in.
Be there.
Just have to.
That's interesting.
Have to tick it off the to-do list. And as soon as it's ticked off the to-do list, we're good.
Quiets the brain.
It quiets the brain. Some sort of self-medication. I'm sure a psychiatrist could have a field day with it, but yeah, that's
interesting.
My fifth and final one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I will say that, you know, you are absolutely, as advertised, you're very consistent. You do not miss. And I suppose that's what drives that. But
yeah, it's whether it's healthy or unhealthy, it gets it done.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. This whole episode, it's funny because when you suggested it, I was like, oh yeah, that's really useful. But just like I kind of prefaced the beginning, I do want to preface at the end here. I guess it's not a preface anymore, but you know, semantics aside, talking about some of these things I think could be useful. And I certainly hope that our experience at least gives people insight to the fact that this is not something that, you know, you just shelve it and problem solved and it's easy. And from the outside looking in, I think it can be, it can appear that way. What I'm trying to say though is I listened recently to somebody talking about this culture of people finding the most interesting thing about themselves to be their flaws. And like, that's a very new cultural thing where everybody wants to talk about their problems and just express them as like, oh, well, this is what kind of makes me a unique, interesting character are the flaws, not my accomplishments, not my interests, not the accolades I've got from externalities, things like that. And I just want to make sure that people understand that this is not one of those scenarios that we are, you know, trying to highlight these issues for any other reason than to impart, hopefully, a couple of nuggets that we've taken from our own difficulties so that you can take them too.
Yes.
That was rambly and not very articulate.
No, you're right. But
hopefully you get the thrust.
But I think, and I would articulate that in that, and you touched on this in the beginning, that sometimes these days with social media, all you see is the home runs. And it can give you this false sense of, everyone's crushing it. Everyone's easy. No one struggles with anything. What's wrong with me? That's utterly and completely ridiculous. So this was just kind of peeling back, you know, see how the sausage is made, if you will. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's just, everyone's got it. There's no woe is me. Just it is what it is. Everyone's dealing with their stuff. There is no way to get through life without sacrifice and just things you got to grind through. We all have them. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, you will have them. So figure them out, address them, chat with them about somebody that you know, like, and trust, and go get in your darn workout. That's it. All right. Well, as always, if you've been listening to this just audio only, of course, we appreciate it, but go to the btwb YouTube channel, find this episode, go into the comments, let us know what you liked or didn't like. And if you have things that you struggle with, you want to air them out, go ahead and air them out. And if you have ideas for topics or guests that we should interview, throw them out there. Boz and I check those things out, and we appreciate all your input. So for Adrian Bosman and Pat Sherwood, until next time, we'll see you then.